Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as the case might be. Welcome or welcome back. Again, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm a partner at Deloitte, and over the past number of years, I've had the pleasure of hosting a series of live webcast conversations that we have been producing for our technology leadership audiences. Conversations that we feel are both timely and relevant. We wanted to make sure that you get to hear from leading Canadian technology executives and technology leaders, but we've also expanded the series to include relevant conversations on tech topics that matter. And also we've introduced a series to highlight and feature Canadian tech startup and tech scale-up companies to hear from their founders and their CEOs. Today, I have a very, very special conversation prepared for you. We are going to be focusing on the topic, very critical topic of ERP modernization. And very specifically, we'll have a chance to hear from an executive from Workday, one of the leading, of course, ERP platforms of today. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Kalen Comba. Kalen, thank you very much for finding the time in your busy schedule to join us. Kalen is the North American Chief Technology Officer at Workday. And Kalen is joining us this morning from the beautiful British Columbia, from Vancouver. So Kalen, thank you first and foremost for your time, and thank you for the wisdom you're going to share with us.
Thank you, Dalibor. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Wonderful. So Kalen, I often start these dialogues with a simple question. I'm inviting all of my guests to tell their stories, how you navigated your life and your career to now be in the role that you're in, being the Chief Technology Officer for North America at Workday. So, Kalen, over to you.
Well, let me take it away. So thanks for that. If I wind back my career, sort of where it really started, I started in hardware. I started in cable plant, computer install, for school boards and for elements like that. And I realized very quickly that hardware had its own limitations. And so I turned my focus more to software, turned my focus more to coding and development, writing systems and solutions, solving business problems, thinking that was the best answer. And for a while it was. And actually, I really enjoyed the development life cycle and writing code. But I had the opportunity, and one of the things that I've been blessed with is great mentors and great people that have helped me through my career. And I think that's really, really critical. So I had folks that said, back in the day, back in a number of years ago, said that they were putting in this new system called PeopleSoft, and that I should come and be a part of the journey and what they were doing. And I questioned it because, of course, I liked what I was doing in software development, and this meant a number of things. It meant I had to take a pay cut. It meant I had to reconfigure my sort of thinking. And I'll tell you, it was the best thing that I ever did, was to stop and refocus. And when I look at it in a macro perspective, that beginning of that journey, what we were doing was we were actually removing a mainframe from a school board and putting in client server technology. Now, this was, again, 25 years ago. But that was kind of the next thing, evolution of what was going on. And I mean, that's a consistent theme throughout, which has been around modernization, up to even today when we talk about modernization. So, doing that, decommissioning a mainframe, putting in client server. I ended up working for PeopleSoft for a decade. So I was there through the acquisition. I've worked with a lot of great Canadian customers, a lot of great North American, a lot of global customers as well. But really, the focus has always been on that next big thing, the next thing that we're doing to modernize. So 25, 30 years ago, the client server was the best that we could do. And that sort of evolved, and then it also kind of topped out. And so that's an interesting aspect to it as well. So if I sort of fast forward a little bit in my career, through that journey of implementing and customizing software and putting it into these companies, realizing there were limitations. PeopleSoft, of course, was acquired by Oracle. We spent 3 years during that. It was a year and a half trying to hold them off, and I was there for another year and a half after the acquisition. And it wasn't a great time. Good company, a lot of smart people, of course, that are trying to do the best. But for me, it wasn't quite a fit. And then I had this opportunity to actually join into the next big thing in cloud. And that was being just started at the time. So a real opportunity, a real space. Dave Duffield and Anil Basri, the founder of PeopleSoft and chief technologist there, were doing something new. It was that next modernization step. So for me, it just basically was a continuation of the journey. And that was actually 15 years ago. So as of next week, I will have been 15 years in this company. I started at Workday really early on. Anil hired me, employee 373, which was, pretty. We've just hired our 30,000th person right now. So
Wow.
the company has scaled and grown.
Wow.
And, as a brief sort of sojourn through what I did at Workday, I was never worried about advancement. I was never worried about the next promotion up the ladder. All of us were incented to just think about what's the best thing we can do for customers. How do we, continue to live this sort of life of virtue where we're doing the best thing for employees, for customers, we're having fun, we're engaging, we're innovating, there's integrity. Our core values really sort of speak to the way that I think about customers. And so, I was in professional services, I was in solution architecture, I was in product, I was in back in services again. I did a whole bunch of different roles in technology and in leadership. And the last sort of the one that I was working with, I was a managing partner, managing some of the largest customers with the complexities. And I've always loved the technology conversation. I've always loved that vision of where we're going, how technology applies to the business as well. And so when the role a year and a half ago came up for CTO of North America, giving me the ability to have conversations at a strategic level with organizations, what they're trying to accomplish, I jumped at the chance. Honestly, I just absolutely jumped at the chance to be in this role in this company. So it's been quite a journey.
It certainly is. So first of all, congratulations on such a successful career. Great. I love what you mentioned. You mentioned the importance of having a mentor.
Yes.
And this is consistent theme as I interview senior leaders, successful leaders. That is a consistent theme. Another thing that you mentioned is the curiosity and the willingness to go and try different things. That's another, I think, very, very common trait. And the last one, I loved what you said. Don't worry about promotion. Worry about values that you have, purpose that you have, and focus on customers. I love those. Thank you for reminding us on what is truly important here. This is a live session. So because it's a live session, we have an opportunity to invite our audience to submit any questions that might have. So audience members, using a Q&A function of this platform, if anything here triggers your interest and you want to ask a question, please submit your question using Q&A, and we'll do our best to address as many questions as we can today. So, Kalen, you touched on the topic of Workday. Of course, it's a common brand, common name today in the conversation around technology platforms, cloud platforms, modern ERPs. I would love if you can reflect a little bit on the actual history of Workday, where it started, why it started, what was the problem that the founders were attempting to solve. What is that sort of the story of origin?
Yes, I love telling this story because it's an interesting one because there's some tenets of the story and some things that hold true even today. And so that's why I kind of love it, because they're enduring, and some of the things that were thought about originally are enduring. And now, keep in mind the market opportunity at the time. So 18 years ago, we had just been through at a hostile takeover. Dave Duffield and Anil Basri were out of the company. They're out of Oracle. Dave is a serial entrepreneur who's done very great things in his life to start amazing companies focused on customer success. So Dave had, I'm going to say conservatively, $10 billion. This is public knowledge, right? $10 billion in the bank account, no non-compete. He had Anil Basri there as his best friend and chief strategist, so somebody that really understands technology and is visionary. And the two of them were just sitting in a diner saying, "What's next?" It's actually the Jack's Diner in Truckee, California, saying, "What is the next thing we're going to do?" There's actually a video on YouTube for this as well, of them just actually having this conversation, saying, "Well, if we were going to do the next thing, what are the things that we would do to make sure that we never repeat the sins of the past?" And the sins of the past were things like, if you develop an ERP platform and you allow people to customize it, and they customize it and knock themselves off an upgrade path, then they can't upgrade. And so that all the great things you're doing, they can't take advantage of. All the things that they have to do, like tax updates, that they can't take advantage of without onerous upgrades. So there's this issue in the kind of the way that things used to happen. Also, there's the 18 years ago, 20 years ago, the internet was becoming more and more popular, right? I mean, it was growing and growing popularity for business. And at the same point, we had Enron, we had WorldCom, we had all of this bad behavior and under the covers, people getting it directly at the database. So you look at all of these things swirling out there saying, if we were going to solve these problems, how would you do it? Well, you would do it by securely, basically coming up with a new way to store and secure information in the cloud. Encryption has to be on all times. Everything has to be encrypted, right? So we have to be trustworthy. Audit has to be on at all times as well. So you need a new way of thinking through how you actually store and secure information so that you always have this audit track of everything going on. And it's not an afterthought. This is again, it's one of those principles. So when I think about the principles of how it was started, again, not an easy thing to do, but architecturally, by putting it in the cloud, by making it secure, by having audit always on, by doing things that by working on configuration rather than customization, it means that we can go from the first few customers. And I mean, at the beginning, the first few customers were on board with us. They were wanting to do that next thing. To go from that to, in 18 years to 10,000 customers that are all using the platform. There's one copy of the data model and kind of the way that things work. So, really interesting and engaging things. And interestingly, I was just at head office yesterday, and I had the opportunity to talk to customer 107. So we've got 10,000 customers. I'm speaking to customer 107. I talked to the person that sold the deal, right? So the original sales rep, he's still here. I talked to him about it. He remembers the account, of course, because this is a relationship game. And when I talked to them, the fascinating part is that they are on the current release, just like everyone else. They're on the current version of software as a service, Workday, just like everyone else. So everything they're using, all the data, all that great rich history, it's here, it's configured to work for them. And when you look at customers, and you look in Canada as an example, Canada, the largest private employer, uses Workday. We have tons of great customers that use Workday. A lot of them have nothing to do with each other from a business perspective. The only thing that binds them together is Workday. Right? The fact that it's configured to work for them in one version, that it works. So that origin, again, let's just say, I'll stop talking about that. The encryption always on, the audit always on, the in the cloud only, the configuration, not customization, the one version. I'll stop talking about those things when they change. They're not changing. So.
That's actually so. I was going to summarize it exactly, but you summarize it for me. So the angle here is that the real problem that was being solved is the fact that most of the customers ended up painting themselves in the corner in terms of ERP upgrades.
Yep.
And because they customized it to the point where it was just impossible, too expensive, too risky. And so the intent was to design something that is native in the cloud, to design something that is encrypted by default as a principle, and auditable by default as a principle, right? And then by doing that, of course, you've removed the problem of constant customizations and modernizations and redeployments and upgrades. The customers really benefit from it now by just subscribing, and you guys are actually doing the upgrades on the back end. Yes. Wonderful. I think that's actually really important for people to understand, like what drove this company to actually start, right? So the question is, what's the state of play now? Like we mentioned 10,000 clients Workday. I would be curious to know, sort of, well, what is the vision and ambition of the Workday as the corporation? What is your current sort of landscape in terms of customers, both in Canada and internationally?
Yeah. So, when I think about our customers in Canada, and I think about the ones that are doing the best, right? The ones that are continuing to find new opportunities, and to continue to thrive. This is a really uncertain time right now. The ones that are doing the best are the ones that I love talking to the most, because they're getting the most out of the platform and they're using it wall to wall. And that really is the goal. The goal when somebody licenses this product is, it's not that we want you to use, 2% of the product and 98% will just be free capacity. It's that we want you to use everything wall to wall, right? Really get into what you're actually doing in the product, configure it, and push us as well. Because when somebody comes with a requirement and says, hey, why don't you guys do this? I'm like, okay, great. So we can look at that and say, now, is this something we can do for 10,000 other customers? That's great. Really good from that side of it. In general terms, I mentioned some of our core values as a company, the Workday core values. Innovation is a core value. So they're just briefly, employees, customer satisfaction, innovation, integrity, fun, profitability are the ones. Innovation is such a key one, because when I talk about customers being on the current release, well, we are continuing to innovate and make everything better under the covers at all times. We're down a path now for about the last 10 years to re-platform for the benefit of all customers into public cloud, which has continued to pay dividends and continue to do that. So we're literally looking at making, like, replacing the chassis of the car while you're driving safely down the highway. So these things are things that we're just able to do without a big re-implementation, without a big it's not your re-platform, it's our re-platform. It's our innovation. So for customers that take advantage of the functionality, they're using human capital management, they're using talent, they're using planning, they're using strategic sourcing, they're using financials, they're closing their books with it. In some cases here, so in BC here, they're using it for student information systems. There's a lot there that customers can use, and that part of it is, it maintains true. That part of it, they continue to be able to take advantage of that. And again, we continue to innovate and update and make things better in the back for all customers.
And when you talk about scope of Workday, if I'm not mistaken, the initial focus was the human capital, the talent, the sort of HR domain. But of course, it has expanded to now cover the full range of traditionally considered ERP scopes, right? What can you share something about? Let's linger on that innovation. What
Yes.
might be some cool new things that you guys are recently introducing on the platform or are planning to introduce imminently? I'm curious to know if there's anything happening on the AI front, or any other cool things that might be noteworthy as we sit today, like February 14th, 2024.
I will answer your question in sort of the seed in the way that we think about future performance and future innovation.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, so about a little less than a decade ago, so Workday has acquired very few technology companies in our lifespan. Few. But it's been very few. But one of them we acquired was about 10 years ago. It was a company called Identified. This is well known. It's on the website. And Identified really thought about a new way to categorize work. So rather than saying it's a who reports to whom, it's a predefined job description, it's those things. It was, let's think about migrating to a skills-based ontology. Let's think about gigs in the economy. Let's think about new functionality. And again, for customers to be able to think about the world in new ways, that was really important. Now, a lot of that is machine learning and algorithmic processing and just core engineering in the way that we do that. One of the things that Workday, I think, is great at is building platforms for multiple possible futures. And so the why this matters is because when we built that, so when we started to say, here's how we're actually thinking about the new world of work, and we started thinking through, from broadly in the HCM side at skills, and in the financial side is more in things like anomaly detection and fraud prevention and things like that, of like, how are we making sure that we're using the machines to actually make it better for the, for users. When the latest boom of AI came out, right? So it is just the latest boom, right? It's not the first one. This is literally the latest. There was the origination, there was the AI winter, there was a whole bunch of things that happened, right? So this latest boom, ChatGPT was at the helm at the tip of the spear on this one. Generative AI was such a big thing. We didn't have to go and acquire something. We didn't have to go and pivot and change our strategy for what we were doing. We literally just said, we're actually platformed and built for this as a possible future. So good, we can actually take advantage of this. So now, when you think about the fact that we've been building up in machine learning and not really talking a lot about it for almost a decade, that AI is that next step, right? So when you think about that next piece of it, so generative AI. So in writing job descriptions, in taking away some of the less, that's more of the drudgery work that people do. You know, the stuff that the machine is good at is summarization of a massive amount of data and looking for anomalies. Great, let's do that in financials. Let's do that in skills. Let's do that in contract analysis. Let's do this. So layering this on and putting this in, that's what we've been able to do very simply from a technology perspective, because we're just, again, there is an abstraction between what the users use and all of the technology pieces that we put in under the covers, whether it's private cloud, public cloud. As we're continuing to invest and to improve and make it better, you get to take advantage of that in the applications.
Excellent. So in other words, the clients will benefit through osmosis. You guys are investing and deploying machine learning capabilities behind the screens, and customers are actually gaining value and benefiting from those functionality without them needing to, you know, go build anything themselves, right? It's another component of this subscription configuration, but we at the back are thinking and doing the things to enable that functionality, right?
100%. And you know, there's an interesting conversation that Carl, our CEO, just said, which is, we're not selling AI.
Yeah,
We're not an AI sales company. That's not us, right? And you think about the market, you think about where it's going, you think about who's going to be big in Gen AI. Okay, you can kind of name these players, you can pick the top 3 or 4 out of a hat, right? But from a Workday perspective, AI just improves what you already have. Right, Gen AI improves what it is for your workers. And you think about the future of work and the future of workers. You know, people want to do meaningful work, and they don't want to be engaged in things that a machine could just be doing for them. So it's not the case of AI is replacing jobs. It is AI is improving the actual work landscape.
Yeah. And you mentioned in your role, you get to travel and speak with some of your biggest, most sophisticated customers.
Yep.
And I would love, of course, this is a leadership conversation. I would love to get your perspectives. What are you hearing are the top 3 to 5 priorities that you're hearing from CIOs as you engage in those conversations?
Yeah. So, you know, a couple of things, and a lot of this, oftentimes I'll help to direct it, right? I had a conversation with a CIO that had acquired, they were acquiring companies, and he was trying to figure out his architecture. And you think about anybody's architecture diagram, and it is typically a mess. It's spaghetti, where there's multiple ERPs, multiple supply chain, multiple, you could have multiple analytics platforms. You could have,
especially in mergers and acquisitions, when you just add a company onto yours, and
Exactly. And so his term, he said that he was talking to the board and saying that, you know what, I'm telling him I've got this strangle methodology. I'm strangling all the things, and I'm strangling the things that, you know, I'm not giving them any resources, and I'm strangling them out. And I challenged and I said, I understand what you're doing. Right. This makes sense from an IT perspective. You need to reduce duplication. You don't want the same thing existing somewhere else. That, because if you do, you've got a risk, you've got a security issue, you've got an integration issue. There's a whole bunch of things that you have there. So I challenge. Here's a term that I use quite often, which is the disappearing architecture. And the concept of the disappearing architecture is quite a simple one. I look at it, again, the macro for my career. That's how I started it, by taking a mainframe. We made it disappear. I took a mainframe out and we went to client server. Later on, that had to go client server into cloud. And so basically, we're making things disappear in that value chain and what IT is delivering. Now, the disappearing architecture, the challenge, of course, is you can do this yourself. And this is what I would say to any IT leader is take your whiteboard and put all the things up there and look for duplication. Look for the systems, and more importantly, the non-systems that are out there, where you've got swivel chair integrations, where you have, you know, people doing, you know, personnel action forms today, things like that, and say, how do you move that into one place? How do you move that into one source of truth, to where you take down the risk, you up the security, you up the access, you up the usability and the user experience. All of these things you get out of it because you're removing disparate systems and you're putting them into one. So really, kind of going to one. Here's the risk. The risk is you can make anything disappear and put it in the cloud. But then, yeah, it's disappeared. But if you've got a cloud here and a cloud there and a cloud here, if you've got 16 clouds, then you didn't really fix the problem. So the disappearing architecture for me also pinpoints into a vendor that has human capital management, that has financial management, that has the supply chain elements that you need. You integrate to the things you need. Sure, there will always be integrations to single sign-on and to some line of business system that runs your business. But how do you simplify? How do you make as much of that go away as possible? So that's really that concept that I love.
Yeah. So I really like the term that you use, disappearing architecture. I've heard recently a variant of this, say, raising the waterline on what you need to be actually thinking and focusing on, like, and essentially, taking those things that are non-strategic and handing them to those who are experts in those to actually run. The challenge there, of course, is how do you maintain appropriate oversight, governance? How do you integrate that effectively? And that's, I think, the balance that every leader individually needs to strike. But this is actually a very, very good point, especially for those scenarios where companies are on the buying spree and are buying companies and inheriting different technologies. So that's big one. That's certainly big priority. Any other sort of priorities that you are hearing from CIOs that might be worth reflecting on?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in general, simplification that doesn't go away. It's sustainment, right? And you talk about governance. I like the idea of having conversations. I think so much time can go by between conversations where you don't talk to your vendor, you don't talk to your partners, you don't talk, and things drift. And so the communication side of it, and I think a big part of that is, governance. And even if it is, every 6 months you're checking in with vendors on what they're doing and how that applies, and having that conversation that's not just a vendor to a buyer, right? This is how do you have a partnership conversation when you think about the old, like, so you want to be is a vendor buyer relationship, is it a partner relationship, is it a trusted advisor, that sort of old chasm thing, right? That old thinking, it doesn't go away, right? You want to have trusted advisors. So not everybody is coin operated. Not everybody is thinking, how do I sell you the next thing, right? We've got Workday in general, in very specifically, has fantastic partners, right? We have fantastic partners that are looking at how do we solve business problems for what's going on. I think that our level of strategic thinking has kind of gone down a little bit right now because everybody's very reactive, and being reactive, it's tough. We're all reacting to the market forces, to everything that's going on in the world right now. So from an IT perspective, it's not just endure, it's not just duck and cover. It is, okay, strategically, what are we trying to accomplish? What else is out there? What are the small things I need to move? How do I decalcify some of the stuff that's going on, right? Calcification in IT, for me, it's the one where I watch. And I can almost guarantee that there are systems that I wrote back in the day, 30 years ago, that are lights out systems where data goes from one system and it checks and sees it because is it ready to go to the other system, it goes to the other system. I can guarantee that stuff is still running because nobody's looking at it, just calcified, and it's still going. So you need to think about how do you challenge and how do you renew and how do you refresh over time.
I love the term calcification. It actually wonderful. I wrote it down. I'm gonna steal that one. I'm gonna steal that one. Which, by the way, is part of the reason for this series. We learn from each other and steal good things, right?
Yeah.
What I think is really important, something you mentioned there was really, really important, and that is ongoing communication between technology leader and participants of their ecosystem. That, I think, is something I personally, of course, a big proponent of that. How can anyone help if we don't know where you're going, where you're heading, where the challenges are? My advice to all CIOs would be figure out a systemic way to engage with the ecosystem around you. Engage with the ecosystem, share your strategies, share your visions, allow people, challenge them to think and come back to you with their proposed ideas and solutions. And then let's have conversations and how can we help. At the end of the day, I think What is really important to appreciate is the biggest of the big picture. All of us in this country, in this industry, have the opportunity actually to not just advance our organizations forward, but by doing that systematically, we will be advancing our society forward and our country forward. So it's in everybody's interest. It is really in everybody's interest that ultimately these clients actually succeed.
Yes.
And how can they succeed if they isolate themselves from the rest of the ecosystem that's there to help? I think that's actually really good comment that you mentioned. So we talked about priorities. Those are the things that people are telling you they are zooming in. I'd love to actually flip back into, not back, but flip on the other side and talk a little bit about what are you observing, discussing, or maybe feeling might be the issues and challenges that technology leaders are sort of struggling with these days.
Yeah. So a couple ones spring to mind. One of the biggest ones is it's always cost. All right. And so the cost and the efficiency of what you're doing and what you're spending and how that's working. And the cost one for me is always interesting because it goes back to value. Right. You can spend money, but if you spend money and you're not getting the value out of it, then it doesn't really feel like good money to spend. Right. It doesn't feel like a good relationship with your vendor if that's the case. So, there's a side of it that says, okay, so if I am, taking advantage of a little bit of what's in your software, well, how do I take advantage of more of that? And then not
Yeah.
only that, do I understand, again, a big part of this is, do I understand what's coming? Do I understand what the next thing is? Have I lined that up against my own organization? Have I done a maturity model assessment and to
Yeah.
see, is my HR department, my financial ops department, does that actually line up? And are they as efficient as they could, should, or would be? So there's elements there of kind of the efficiency side of it. I think that you always kind of for me, it always goes into, I think about the strategies of what you're trying to accomplish and then the tactics. And when I get in and see a conversation around just cost control, it's got to align to the strategy. Because if it's just cost for the sake of cutting costs, that's not really great. You may be out of business and you don't know it yet. If that's all you're talking about is that, you need to have a strategy that says, here's how we actually grow. Here's how we become more resilient. Here's how we actually, how we actually are going to work through time as things change. So, that aspect of it, I think, is such a huge one. The tactical side, again, I watch projects knock around without, leadership and governance and, misalignment to strategy. And even in some cases, it's simple things like the strategy of an organization of how are you viewed on the street, as an example. Are you viewed as an organization that has great technology? When you think about the fact that we have 5 generations now in the workforce, we have 5 decades in the workforce, right? You think about like somebody that's about to exit the workforce, they're not dying to use the latest mobile device. They will, but they're not, most of them are not dying to use that. They're not thinking that's the next greatest thing. Whereas somebody coming into the workforce, they probably don't even have an email address. They probably don't know their phone number. They have a Snapchat ID. How do you actually bridge all of that and say, here's how you're going to come in and be a meaningful part of what we're trying to accomplish? Well, the strategy has to be there, right? And you have to say, we use great technology to attract the best talent. We think about skills. We think about, from a financial side of things, are you Workday challenges? We have a challenge internally, which is a 0-day close every period. And the 0-day close, I mean, it shakes out to everybody, right? When we have employees traveling and you do your expenses, you have to have them in before the period close. We don't want this long tail stuff out there. So the tactic of people putting expenses in, very tactical, very gritty, but it supports the 0-day close strategy. It supports the higher level strategies. So the strategy and the tactics, alignment there, I think, are really, really key. And, again, it goes back to, what are you trying to accomplish? And do the systems that you have in place support this? Is everybody on the same page, in doing this? And I get it. I work at Workday and I think about Workday 20 hours a day, right?
Yeah.
And I know that in your business, whatever business you're in, you're thinking about that. And I would expect you, if you're in financials, you're in retail, you're in healthcare, you're like, I know you're thinking about other things, but there's an aspect that says that the technology is the enabler for doing what you're doing even better.
Yeah. Very, very good. So the number one issue you mentioned is cost. And I think I actually would agree with your answer. We need to start thinking about value. And look at the cost from that prism, right? And if the cost actually gets us the value that we need or expect or can articulate, then the cost becomes less of an issue. And I think what you also said is really important to re-emphasize. Yes, we are at the moment of economic uncertainty and high inflation and high interest rate, and all of these things are true. But the fact remains, no one can shrink themselves to success, right? You cannot shrink yourself to success. So the
Yes.
has to be thoughtfully managed. And then misalignment between strategy and execution. And lastly, to mention, and I love this too, 5 decades of workforce intermingling and how organizations could leverage investments in modern tech to elevate their brand, both from the attraction of the right talent, but also retention of their existing workforce. It's very, very good. Now we are heading towards, and I wanted us to get there to talk about actually the ERP modernization. And I wanted to ask you, when you see a very successful modernization project, um, what went well? What are the things and elements that make up a great ERP modernization program succeed?
Mm-hmm. I want to capitalize on one thing you just said, which is the shrink your way to success. There's an analogy that I love, which is you can't diet your way to fitness, right? If you
Yeah.
want to, if you want to be, I mean, diet's important. It's an aspect to it, but you can't diet. You can't. That's not how it works, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So keep that in mind and thinking through kind of what good or what great looks like as well. When I think about projects, when I think about things like modernizations that have really, really worked well, a number of things spring to mind, right? It really does. And it goes back to what I said before, the strategy, right? The strategy of what you're actually trying to accomplish here and why. Why is it that you're actually going to modernize? What is the reason, right? And it's not just we're trying to keep from going out of business. We're trying to whatever. It's, we actually directionally, we know that the future is actually into going into new systems that provides more for the workers, provides more visibility, provides faster access, provides all of those things. So having a set goal, and this is not new project management stuff, right? This is, you need to have the direction set so that you actually know where you're going. Executive alignment, all right? So governance and steerco. So I can't emphasize this enough, which is having proper governance, having the right executives that are saying, yeah, we understand that without going this way, that we're not going to be as competitive. We're not going to achieve the goals for our organization as well. So we want to do that. And you kind of you cascade that down. And so once you understand where you're going and you have the right folks that are providing air cover for this, then that you can go to the next steps down, which is, platform selection. Does the actual tool that you're looking at, is that going to meet the need? Is it going to meet a little bit of the need? Is it going to meet all of the need? Is it a partner that you're, a vendor partner that you're going to work with that you trust and that is somebody that you actually want to engage with in the long term? That element is super important of making the right choice and the right bets on technology. And a lot of that is track record, and a lot of that is one of the favorite things. Just a quick plug for Workday. One of the favorite things we like to do, and I encourage everybody to do this. When you find out somebody in your network knows they use Workday, go talk to them about it. Go have a conversation. Go have a coffee with them and see what the good, the bad, and the ugly really is about Workday. I don't have to be in the room. I mean, we don't need to be there in the room to actually have this conversation. You'll hear about it and you'll hear the overwhelming positive nature of it. Sure, there's always some things, but it's overwhelmingly positive. So that selection is important. And then understanding that it's not just a technology implementation. So
Yeah.
really, you kind of look at it and say, okay, there's sort of the Venn diagram here, which is it capital T transformation? Is it small t transformation? And with transformation also comes change and change impact. And so that side of it, right? So the transformation and change aspect to it, really, it goes back to, I mean, we've been doing this for a long time. We've been doing these projects for a long time. There's a new way in implementing software with something like a Workday, but it's still a project, and it is still an alignment of it's codification of your business and into a system. And there's people. right? And the people actually have to be brought along in the journey as well, and deciding what you're doing. Deciding if there are new ways to support your business, new ways to do your business, new ways and new fashions to to be able to do that. And then as well, figuring out on the back end what your support system looks like too, of how do you support something that is different, because Workday is different. Workday is an on-demand software that releases two major updates a year. So you kind of think about that and say, okay, so in the old school way of thinking, when it was client server, when it was, and some of my competitors are still their client server, even though it's cloud washed, and they wrap it and they rehost it somewhere. But you still look at that. Workday is different because we're always delivering something new. So that enforces it kind of forces this change in an organization where you're better off to take a product management mindset and think about, what is the vendor doing? What Workday doing? And how does that apply to my business? Because that's going to keep changing, and that keeps making it better as well. So you kind of think about the support side too. And I love the product management mindset, rather than saying, okay, how many people in IT do I need to support this? How many people in HR do I need to support this? You think about it and say, functionality wise, right? So if I own somebody that owns benefits and is a functional technologist, that's a really compelling role there. So on the backside of the whole thing, you go through an entire project, and you've done the technology, you've done the transformation, you've done the change, you have leadership support. This is all working. And then who's waiting there? You've got people that are actually waiting there saying, yeah, you know what? We'll take the first call. We understand the product. We're name support contacts. We understand how to make things better. And we understand that a little bit of effort is going to be required ongoing, right? New updates are coming out. We're never going to be in a situation where you're going to have a major technical upgrade in 3 years just to do a tech upgrade and not have any new functionality. You've got this spread out updates over those, over into the future, into perpetuity. Because again, I go back to my example of that customer 107. They're on the current release. That's 15 years of updates. That's 15 years of us actually providing them with the latest thing. And so having the conversation, it's such an easy and simple conversation about, what are you doing today?
Yeah.
And I can have that at any point in time with any customer. So I think there's a real program around kind of the way this stuff works. Some higher level thinking, help with, from a partnership standpoint too, because you think about who's the technical side, who can help from a systems integrator side of things as well. I think it really is important. So to have that, the advice from outside too.
So I was listening and taking notes here. I extracted six elements that you mentioned. Number one is having the enterprise have a clarity of why are they embarking on this, clarity on what they really intend to achieve in terms of value. Why do we do this? Number two, executive alignment.
Yep.
And what I mean by that, I'm certain. Assuming that what I mean is executive alignment both horizontally and vertically. So all the executives understand and can actually explain why, and why is that important for them personally. The third thing that you mentioned is being thoughtful about platform selection. So doing the hard work, fun work of investigating what the options actually are.
Yep.
In selecting of the platform, but you also mentioned very importantly, selecting the right partner. Yep. Implementation partner, solution partner, however you want to call it, whom you trust and with whom you can actually build strategic partnership over time. Because as you said, number 6, this is not something that stops. Once you move into a platform like Workday, there is an ongoing expectations of modernizations and updates and configurations and functionality. So you should have a partner relationship with someone that you pick to work with you on this particular front. Number 5, the number 4 that you mentioned, this is not a technology project. I think that's actually really, really important. This is not a technology project. This is business modernization project that happens to be done and achieved through modern technology, leveraged modern technology, but it's not a tech project. Number 5 thing that you mentioned, all people in the organization need to actually understand that why, and need to be thoughtfully and carefully brought along, educated, trained, get excited about opportunity to leverage something new and modern. And that is, I think, a very, very major part of the success. And then the last thing that you mentioned is being thoughtful about the ongoing support. How are you going to actually continue leveraging and extracting maximum value and benefit after the quote unquote project ends? And then you reflected on your product teams is an effective way to think about it. And having, it almost feels like you were mentioning, like having embedded product teams in the functional areas, people who will be named as owners for this particular functionality. Those will be the ones that need to stay closely connected to understand what's coming, to understand the product roadmap, and so on and so forth, right? Those are the sort of 6 things that
Yes.
kind of make the successful ERP program work. I would love to ask you actually to think about, I'm sure you come across bad projects, things that did not go well.
Yep.
Now, obviously, I don't want to talk about the inverse of these 6, but I do, obviously, the inverse of the 6 would be risks. But I would love to ask you to think about, like, what are those common observations that lead to potential disasters? And I would want to call them disasters because these programs are now so impactful and so immersed in the business operations that if things go south, this can tip the company. Like, this is serious stuff. So when things do go wrong, where do you feel things actually get wrong?
Yeah. So let me take it from sort of macro, and then I'll go into you know, with some more sort of granular examples. One of the big things, just in products, I mean projects in general. So when I mentioned early on that Workday was built to basically to enable multiple possible futures. That's but this concept is a little bit esoteric, but it's very important. Because when you think about, you go through and you've got your 6 and everything goes well in your project and you get to go live. Okay, so go live is such an interesting aspect because once you're live, now you've got people interacting with the system, you've got people, you know, that are inputting data, that are doing events across the data, all of the kind of good stuff, right? But because we're built for multiple possible futures, you still have this open aperture to be able to do more, that you can do more with it at any point. Now, the risk is when you don't. The risk is when you say, you know, so imagine if I buy a new car and I buy a new car and I say, great, I know I need to put, I mean, to buy a gas car, I know I need to put gas in it. And that's all I do is put gas in it. And I ignore the warning lights and I don't rotate the tires and I don't check the brakes and the windshield cracks and about like a whole bunch of things go wrong. After 5 or 6 years, that's not going to be a very good driving experience. Right. So routine maintenance and thinking through what it is we're trying to accomplish. Again, back to those strategic goals, the strategy and then the tactics that are supporting what's off the back of this. So rolling adoption. And again, these are things that how do we improve and continue to make it better? So I have seen instances, you know, where with Workday customers where they buy the software, they put the software in, and then they do one of these and they say, great, it's running.
Done.
And they don't look at it again for years. And then they wonder why it's maybe not fit for where their business is, you know, the direction of their business. They wonder why people aren't engaging. They wonder why, you know, like adoption. We can measure all this. Workday is measured for instrumented for measurement. So you can tell how fast somebody is, you know, how fast an onboarding is, how fast the period close is. You can tell all of that stuff that you can look at it. But if you don't staff to think it through, then it's like buying that car and just, you know, 7 years in saying, well, I guess I'll just park it because, you know, it's not doing what I need. So that is the risk, right? Because it's a mindset shift. This is not something that it's not a destination you get to and you stop. It's a destination you get to, and it's like you've trained for a marathon and you still enjoy running. So you still do stuff, right? You're still going to continue to do this. So even if you've gone through it. So that's one aspect to it, which is kind of the overarching, you know, thinking through, okay, like, so the product manager mindset of like, how do we continue to engage and to get value out of this platform? If you don't do that, then, you know, it still works, but maybe not as fruitful as you'd want it to be. The other side is, you know, when you kind of go back through, and not to walk back through the 6, but to think through, if you treat it as just a technology project, right? So, you know, an A to B upgrade. So you went from you had something that was red or blue, and you've gone to something that is now orange. You know, that's one of those ones where that's tough in any situation. Mapping old process loops, mapping the way that it used to be, because it's always been done that way, and without challenging yourself to transform, right? As soon as you start to take some of these things that, you know, these chairs away from the table, it gets pretty lonely. So if you don't have a real thought on transformation, if you don't have a real thought on change, if you don't have, you know, these elements, well, then all of a sudden you're at a table for, you know, for six, sitting there alone saying, well, the strategy was we're going here, but I have nobody to take me there. Or you've got executives that are saying, I want, you know, I support what we're doing here, but I don't have the people to do it. It can't be just a technology implementation. It has to be more all-encompassing. It's got to have more to it. And then, so in general terms, and I'm not saying it needs to be the world's biggest project every time, right? That's not the point here, but I'm saying it has to be thoughtful, and it has to be representative of what you're trying to accomplish, and are you staffed appropriately, and are you, again, governance and the model, are you organized in such a way that you can be successful, and that you understand what the goals are going to be when you get there, and how do you continue to achieve those as things turn, as things move in the future as well.
Yeah. Very, very good. Very good. Are there any misconceptions that you are aware of around Workday that maybe you can address?
Yeah. Here's the biggest one. The biggest misconception about Workday is that we are an HR only provider. Now, we are a great HR provider. We're also a great financials provider. We also manage your vendors. We also manage, you know, the all elements of business. When you think about strategic sourcing, when you think about planning, when you think about the way that business works, that we have the ability to actually offer that. We offer that now, right, in a configuration way with one copy of data. But because of Dave Duffield's history, right, he started an HR company, and then he started another HR company, and then he started Workday. People think that, oh yeah, it can't do financials. Oh no, it can do financials. Absolutely, it can do financials, and it can do way more than that. That's one aspect to it. So I would always challenge people to look more deeply and say, even, you know, even in areas where maybe we don't do the specific thing that for your line of business that supports what you're doing, maybe there's something, you know, whatever, name it, right? Some very specific, you know, if you do property management and you use Yardi, if you use Maximo for, you know, or like whatever, right? Use other things. Great. Well, we also have an integration platform. So where you need to, that you can integrate out and have the right data in front of the right person at the right time. So that aspect is kind of one piece of it. That's a fairly common misconception about Workday, is that, you know, we only would do that.
I think that, like, and I've had a version of this conversation on this channel with a gentleman who runs ServiceNow for Canada.
Yep.
Similar misconception that ServiceNow is IT service management product.
Right.
Well, it was 18 years ago. It's
Right.
now a full-fledged platform, just like what you described with Workday. Yes, I certainly get that.
Yeah, that's a big one for sure. That is a big one.
Yeah. Any other things that you feel might be misconceptions out there about Workday that we should address?
Yeah, I guess in any realm, you know, we're always looking at it saying, you know, are you getting the value out of what you're paying for, right? Because Workday is a premium product. You know, we're a premium product for a reason, though. We're a premium product because a significant portion of subscription revenue goes back into R&D. And the R&D that's what's under the covers that's making it work for all customers, where we're continuing to innovate, we're continuing to make it better, we're continuing to invest in the things that you use. So I mean, when we talk about human capital management, there's one. When we talk about financials, it's just extended in the same model. You know, those are elements that, you know, if you're an ERP wall-to-wall customer with us, you're investing your with us from your license dollars, your subscription dollars, those are going back into R&D on the products you're using. We don't have 5 different GL products. We have one. You know, those are elements that I think are super important. So, and that goes back to the cost and value, right? That cost value aspect, which is, you know, it's a premium product. However, there is the value there. Then, you know, that side of it. And then the other piece too is I think another real, I mean, this is a very technical misconception. I think that at some point in time, we kind of, I, we sort of got locked in this thinking that an N tier or a 3-tier, 4-tier architecture was the only way to do ERP technology. So you had a database and you had an app server and you had a web server, and that's the only way that it worked. And when I think about the way that Workday works, so hundreds of microservices deconstructed across managed services and hyperscalers, cloud native application portfolio for that, continuous integration, continuous development, the number of things we're doing from an automation standpoint, the next level thinking to provide this on-demand service. It's not just cloud wrapped. It's not, we didn't just take old technology, cloud wrap it and rehost it somewhere else. We actually developed natively from scratch in the cloud in a new way to do it. And we had advice from Amazon, we had advice from Google, we had advice from Salesforce when we originally started out on how to do this. How do you actually do this properly? And we didn't have to take anything from the past. We didn't actually have anything from the past because that all went in the old to the old company. So, starting fresh was kind of an interesting thing. So it's that piece of it, which is, do you understand, as a tech leader, that it's not just there's no easy button from your current to you've got to re-implement. My competitors are saying that all the time. We're just going to cloud host you. That's just rehosting. That's replatforming. That's difficult to do. So you kind of look at it and say, okay, what is the next thing for the next 15, 20? Like, these are big decisions that you're making. So, big bets on technology and technologists that are doing it right.
Kalen, we are coming close to the time. I wanted to ask you a question about your thoughts on the alliances and ecosystem. You mentioned the importance of picking the right strategic partner, right solution integrator. Can you maybe share some thoughts about, obviously Deloitte would be one of SIs, solution integrators for Workday. Any reflection or any advice to CIOs as they contemplate sort of that aspect of the triangle, if you wish?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a good question. And it's one where we rely upon our partners to help build out the whole story. Because when you think about, we write and we build, so we basically build, write, and sell software. That's what Workday does. And it aligns to what the business needs. And in many cases, we hit the market with something that was a product, and then we improve it, right? So we make it better over time. The interesting aspect to it, you kind of think about that push and pull, or that triangle of, we've got solutions, customers have problems, but they need advice. They need advice in order to make it all work. And the advice is the element here where, thinking about how do you solve these big strategic long-term problems? How do you actually make it so that you will be in business in the 5, 10, 25 years? How do you build, so for me, the thing that SIs bring in really is the more, I'll say, dynasty level thinking, right? How do you think of this in 100 years, right? How do you think about, what this does? Because you can get there with a Workday implementation, and you can get there. We have professional services too, but in the defense of I think the partners, you have industry partners, you have perspectives that are broader than just in the software. So it brings that to light, and it really, I think, helps with organizations. So, it's not everything has to be a multi-billion-dollar engagement. It can be a coffee. It can be something where you're saying, how do we engage? How do we actually have what are we trying to accomplish here? Those are those pieces of communication and of transparently trying to do the best for business. You mentioned it. How do you make sure that you're going to be in business? How do you make sure that you're actually going to continue to be as the employer of choice that's attracting the top talent? And, are you open enough to actually be able to do this? And are you going to be there for the long term? So those are things I think are super important to just have a bigger conversation, because no one of us has the answer in a box. I don't have it. The customer doesn't have it. Like, we needs all of us in the conversation.
Everybody, I love that. I love it. This is such a wonderful way to wrap up this conversation, Kalen. I want to thank you so much for your time. We covered a lot of topics. We have recorded this webcast, and I will soon post it both on LinkedIn and on YouTube. I want to thank you very much for your time, and for our audience members, please join us tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm going to be hosting Hamed Abbasi, who is the co-founder and CEO of Pluto, one of the most exciting Canadian fintech startups and scale-ups, and it'll be part of our Canada's Got Tech Talent series of live webcasts. And with that, Kalen, thank you very much again. Have yourself a lovely Wednesday.
Thank you, Dalibor. Thanks, everyone. This was fantastic.
All the best. Bye-bye.